Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar. My name is Siddharth, or just Sid if that's easier, and I'm going to be your host for today's session. I'm also joined by Bruce McLean from our pre-sales team, and he's here to answer any questions that you may have over the course of the session. But before we get even started with today's topic, I just want to make sure that there's no issue with the audio, and I hope you have no issue with viewing my chat screen as well. So in case you have any difficulties with the webinar setup, do reach out to us on the live chat and we'll try to resolve your issues. I'm just going to pause for about 10 to 20 seconds. Just want to make sure that everything is all right with the webinar setup. We recently had a few glitches during our session, so just want to make sure that everything's okay with my audio and with my chat screen. So you should be able to see the 72-hour challenge on your screen, and I hope you can hear me clearly as well. I just want to get a couple of other routine housekeeping things out of the way. The first is that we will be sharing you the recording of today's session within a day or two. So you'll be receiving an email of the webinar recording. So you can very well go ahead and share this with your colleagues or anyone else, right? And the other thing is that, like I said, we have Bruce McLean on the live chat. So as and when you have any questions or you want to discuss anything in more detail, please feel free to drop in your questions on the live chat and we'll try to answer them immediately, right? And depending on the response, I can even try to do a live Q&A at the end of the session, right? So over the course of the webinar, I can try to answer some of the questions out loud for the benefit of the entire audience. And if time permits, I'll try to do a live Q&A at the end of the session, right? So this is the agenda for today's session. We're essentially going to be talking about Article 33 of the GDPR, right? And we look at what exactly the GDPR defines in Article number 33, and also how we can go about achieving what Article number 33 requires us to do, right? So it's essentially about reporting personal data breaches. So we'll look at how we can do that. We'll look at the role of a SIEM solution in helping with Article number 33. And we're going to look at a whole bunch of best practices in terms of how we can run reports, daily reports, what kinds of events we need to track in our environment, what kinds of events that we need to get alerts for, and things like that. Right? I'm not going to spoil the surprise, right? So this is just broadly what we're going to be talking about in today's session, and we'll also over the course of the session jump into Manage Engine Log 360 to illustrate a point. Right, so Log 360 is our comprehensive SIEM solution, and over the course of the webinar, to show you some reports or alerts, I may just jump to Log 360 to illustrate my point, right? So this is what we've got planned for today's session. It's going to be a 40 to 45-minute presentation, right? But what I want you to also do is reach out to us on the live chat with any questions that you have specifically to something that concerns you in your environment, right? So if you have a specific issue that you're trying to deal with, feel free to reach out to us on the live chat and we can have an engaging discussion, right? Or even if you want to know more details about the product, because I'm going to keep this session more general in terms of looking at providing you solutions to problems rather than pitching our product. So in case you're interested in our own product, Log 360, you can get those details again on the live chat, right? So just got a whole bunch of routine housekeeping and agenda related stuff out of the way. So let's get started with the crux of today's session, right? So we're going to be looking at data breaches and mitigating or reporting data breaches for the GDPR. So for that, obviously, the first thing that we need to know is what is a data breach, right? So this is the definition, and this is from the GDPR. And the reason it's important for us to look at this definition is because data breaches is something that we have a certain meaning for data breach in our head, right? So if I think data breach, I'm generally thinking about someone coming into my organization. Maybe he's a vendor and he comes in and he maybe copies some sensitive files from my machine and takes it away when he leaves, right? Or I think about maybe an attacker who's breaching my network, accessing my file server and copying files and stealing data, right? But the important thing to remember is that a data breach, the scope of what is considered a data breach, goes beyond what we generally conceptualize when we think of a data breach, right? So you can see the definition right here. A data breach is a breach of security leading to the destruction, loss, alteration, unauthorized disclosure, or access to personal data, right? So not just your whole conventional network getting breached and a file server and database records getting stolen, right? So it goes beyond that. Obviously, that's also a data breach. But the point is, a data breach goes beyond just what we conventionally conceptualize to be a data breach, right? So this is very important. So even your accesses, that itself is a problem. If unauthorized access is a problem. So if someone in your organization is not supposed to see a particular piece of information and they access it, that still constitutes a data breach, right? We look at whether that's actually a huge problem and whether you actually have to report this to the authorities. But the point is, in just plain definition terms, all of those scenarios are also data breaches. So you really need to start thinking about how you can prevent things like that as well, right? So those things are a big problem. I also have this stat right here from the Verizon's 2018 Data Breaches Investigations report, which I strongly recommend reading for gaining a lot of insights into what's happening today in the world of data breaches. And this stat really stood out for me, right? It said 68% of breaches took months or longer to discover. Think about that. 2/3 of data breaches took more than months to discover, right? Imagine if you found out right now that 2.5 months ago, your database was compromised and records were stolen, right? That's horrifying, right? We can't imagine what it would mean to our organizations if we find out today that a data breach happened 3 months ago, right? But Verizon actually found that this was the case 68% of the time, that organizations were not aware of data breaches until months after it happened. Now, with regards to the GDPR, this is going to be a problem, right? Discovering breaches months after they happen is going to be a huge problem with the GDPR because of article number 33. And we're going to look at that in the next slide. Article 33, notification of a data breach, right? This is explicitly stated in the GDPR. So I've actually quoted text right from the GDPR's laws and not modified anything. I've just highlighted a few portions that is key for us to understand. But what you see right here is explicitly stated in the GDPR that in case a personal data breach occurs in your organization, the controller shall, without undue delay and where feasible, not later than 72 hours after being aware of it, notify the personal data breach to the authorities, right? So there is a little bit of gray area in terms of they say that you have to report the breach if the breach is of significant consequence for the individuals whose data has been compromised. But the point is, if you have a personal data breach, you have to report this within 72 hours. And that's why the title of today's webinar is the 72-hour challenge, right? So this is explicitly stated, and we have to really stress on this because this is something that you are going to be audited for, right? This is not one of those things, a loser requirement that you might see in different compliance regulations that may say implement basic measures, right? So that is still subjective to a certain extent. But this article number 33 of the GDPR is very explicit, right? So the controller has to document personal data breaches. Documentation is going to be very, very important. And the documentation must contain the facts about the personal data breach. We'll have a look at this in the next slide. And you need to actually note down the effects of the data breach and the remedial action taken. Right? So essentially what the GDPR is saying is that if you have a personal data breach of consequence in your organization, you are liable for that data breach, and you have to report the breach to the authorities within 72 hours, right? So the GDPR is actually not, the GDPR is not actually asking you to avoid data breaches altogether. Instead, the GDPR is actually asking you to, is basically saying, in case you have a data breach, you need to tell the authorities, because that's accountability, right? So in case you have a data breach, you have to inform the supervisory authorities that this is exactly what happened. So this is that's what we saw in the previous slide was explicitly stated, and this is what you practically have to do, right? So we have an interesting question before that. We have a question from one of our attendees, Taj, who wants to know that if you had a data breach 3 months ago and you become aware of it, say yesterday, would you have met Article 33, Article 33's requirements, as in you have made them aware within the time frame? And the answer to that is yes. If you did find out only yesterday, you will have and you're reporting it within 72 hours of finding out, you will still be compliant. However, you need to have proper documentation in place in terms of why the breach was discovered only 3 months after it actually happened, right? So you will still be compliant. You will still be compliant if you inform the authorities within the 72 hours of being known about the breach. However, as part of the documentation, you really need to be doing a whole bunch of things that we're going to discuss in this slide. And so long as you do all these things and mention the reasons for any delays in the notification, you're still good to go. You're still compliant, and yeah, you're good to go basically, right? So this slide says what are the things you actually have to do if you are breached. That is, if you find out now that there was a personal data breach in your organization, whether the actual breach happened right now or earlier is not the point, but rather if you become aware of a breach, personal data breach right now, here are the things that you need to do, right? So you have to file an incident report, and though the report needs to contain these details: the nature of the breach, that is what exactly the breach was. Was it a SQL injection? Was it a compromise on your file server? Was it ransomware, right? You have to mention that. You have to then mention the impact of the data breach, right? How many people were affected as a result of the personal data breach? So this is where the GDPR is bringing in accountability. It's saying that if you have a data breach in your organization, you need to know that these are the individuals affected, and these are the records that were either stolen or destroyed or manipulated, right? So, and then consequences becomes very important, because you guys know how important personal data is, right? So if someone were to find out your personal data in terms of your address or your social security numbers and things like that, there is a risk associated to that person's life, right? So this is the truth, because if bad guys get to know these details, there are obviously risks associated for that person that they need to be made aware of. And the GDPR is saying, hey, you got to mention the consequences as well, right? So this is the way of the GDPR is making all of us more accountable for the data that we've collected, and more accountable for ensuring the security of the data, right? And this is actually one of mine and several other security professionals' most favorite article of the GDPR, simply because this article is clearly saying that organizations must be liable and accountable for the security of personal data, right? Because what you see then after consequences is measures adopted. So the GDPR wants you to tell them what were the measures that you took to then mitigate the breach, right? You found out that a breach has happened. What have you done next? Have you gone on to block the malicious IP address, or recover data, or just figure out exactly what has happened and take action, right? So this is something that you have to mention. Additionally, I strongly recommend mentioning measures that you already had in place, right? Because if you have a personal data breach and you're able to say that we had a whole bunch of security policies enabled in our environment, because of which we were able to detect certain things, and because of which we were able to limit the data breach, then the authorities are not going to fine you, right? But the problem can arise that you have a personal data breach and you don't have measures in place to tackle the breach. Right? You have a personal data breach and you can't just report to the authorities that, hey, a personal data breach happened. Not sure exactly who's the victim, not sure exactly if the damage is under control, not sure exactly what we had in place, not sure exactly what we're going to do about it. That is not data breach reporting, right? Data breach reporting also means you have to mitigate the data breach, right? So it's not just a matter of notifying the authorities, but it's notifying the authorities what security measures your organization had in place and what measures you're taking up to contain, to do damage control, basically, right? Contact details of the DPO, obviously more straightforward. The GDPR says that these are the minimum amount of details that you want in your incident report, right? What I recommend is that an incident report must be really comprehensive to also include all the security measures that you currently have in place that helped you detect the breach, right? Because that makes it more comprehensive and makes you more accountable in saying that you're actually taking steps to protect personal data, right? And if the notification is not made within 72 hours, so in case you found out a breach and you don't report it within 72 hours, you have to have reasons for the delay, right? So and again, the reasons have to be legit. It's obviously not that you can say that you forgot or you had other things to do, because these things are high priority. And the GDPR is reiterating that you have to be responsible if something bad happens to the personal data of the individuals that you've collected, right? So this is what you got to do if you're breached, right? We've got a couple of questions more regarding data breaches and reporting it within 72 hours. But I hope my answer for Taj's question clarified most of your concerns. If not, please keep the questions coming, and we'll be happy to keep answering them over the course of the webinar, right? So this is where we stand. We've got Article 33. Article 33 expects us to report personal data breaches, and we now know what are the details that we must put inside the report while reporting, right? So let's look at how we're going to go about this, right? Let's look at how we're going to approach the problem of meeting Article 33 and the larger issue of data breaches, right? Because just to keep, I just keep reiterating this again and again, Article 33 is something that the auditors can really verify compliance for, and your report is actually what they're going to use to verify compliance. So the more comprehensive, the more elaborate, the more details you're able to furnish in your incident report, there's a better chance that they verify compliance, right? Because if it's not a convincing report, you might have some problems to deal with. So how do we approach the problem of data breach reporting? And I usually classify the problem, the solution, into three parts, right? You've essentially got to implement measures to reduce the chance of being breached in the first place, and that's ideal, right? So no data breach, no problem, right? So if you have things in place to prevent data breaches from happening, then Article 33 is not even needed, right? However, obviously, there is no sure shot guarantee to prevent data breaches, right? You can implement a lot of things. You can have all your patching in place. You can have email content filtering. You can you can implement other best practices such as enforcing least privilege, user education, and all of that. But obviously, none of those measures are a 100% guarantee, which is why you need the second solution, which is measures to detect and respond to incidents. Right? You need measures that, in case something goes wrong in your environment, you are in a position to detect it and flag that event, and then go and investigate. Right? So that is where SIM solutions come into the picture. Security, information, and event management solutions come into the picture. Right? And the third solution is measures to recover from a breach. So in case you have loss of personal data or modification or unauthorized alteration of personal data, you need to be able to recover the original piece of information. And this is actually stated explicitly in Article 32, right? We're not dealing with that today, but there's actually it talks about maintaining availability and resilience of data, right? So this is essentially to say that you have to have backup systems in place so that in case there is a breach, you are in a position to recover from it, right? So 1 and 3 are obviously very important, but we are going to be concerned with number 2, measures to detect and respond to incidents, right? So ideally, in terms of a larger data security strategy, we recommend you splitting your security program into these 3 components, right? Measures to reduce the chance of being hit by a data breach, then measures to actually detect and respond to incidents, and measures to recover. So we're going to focus on number 2. Let's see how a SIM solution is going to help us here, right? So before I move on to the next slide, answer this for me. If something happened right now in your network, what can you refer to find out exactly what happened, right? For example, if someone logs on to your file server right now, what can you look at to find out who logged onto your file server, right? Very simple question, right? And yep, a couple of you have given the answer already on the live chat. You've said logs, right? Absolutely. You need to leverage your logs, your audit logs, to be able to detect different kinds of incidents, right? Like I just gave a simple example of a logon, but say you have something a little more elaborate, right? Like events that lead to a data breach. All of these events are being logged in your network, and you need to leverage these audit logs using a SIM solution to detect and respond to incidents. Let's see how we get started with that, right? So the first, like I said, audit logs going to be extremely crucial for several compliance regulations, PCI DSS, HIPAA, a whole bunch of different regulations, and it's going to have a role to play in the GDPR as well when it comes to helping you detect and respond to incidents, right? So the GDPR doesn't really doesn't really tell you that you have to manage your logs, right? So if any of you are familiar with other regulations such as HIPAA or PCI DSS, PCI DSS actually explicitly tells you that you need to enable system logging and collect all of these logs into a tool, right? The GDPR doesn't do that. GDPR doesn't say that. However, it is still a great measure to have when it comes to article number 33. Right? So audit logs, as security professionals today, you know how important audit logs are, right? So here's what we're going to do to get started. We first have to identify the different log sources in our environment, right? Which are the different machines that generate logs. Specify an audit policy on these machines, right? Tell these machines for what events they need to generate log entries for. That's specifying an audit policy. Then we centralize all of these logs into a central repository, which is a SIM solution. And then the SIM solution is going to help you run reports every day to review different kinds of security events. We look at examples in the next slide. It's going to help you set up alerts to detect what are known as indicators of compromise, right? These alerts tell you that, hey, something might be up in your environment, something's fishy, something might be up. For example, maybe an end user just had 10 repeated failed logons to your file server, right? So it gives you notifications for things that require your attention. And we look at how we can streamline the process of incident management by integrating the SIM solution with a ticketing tool, right? So let's go over each one of these things quickly, right? Just give you an idea of what each of these things entail so that you can then ask us on the live chat more details about a specific area that's causing you problems, right? So specifying an audit policy. This essentially means that you have to define logging on the system. Tell the machine for what events you need a log entry generated for. Let me give you an example by using my own laptop right here, right? I'm just going to open my group policy editor um, and show you on a Windows machine what enabling auditing entails. Right, so if you actually, some of you might be familiar with this if you've worked with domain controllers and Windows servers, right? So you can go to what the security settings right here, the local policies, the audit policy, and you can essentially see that Windows has given you 9 different policies for which you can enable auditing for, right? And by default, they're all no auditing, meaning auditing is not enabled. So what you can do is you can choose a particular event, say auditing logon events, go to properties and enable the success and failure for this particular event, which means that successful and failed logon events will be tracked, right? You take privileged use, say the same concept applies, right? So of course, I have the local policy, so a lot of my settings get overridden because of the group policy that our security team has enabled. But what you have to do essentially is tell the machine for what events you want to generate log entries for, right? So this would differ depending on what the different systems that you have, like on your, or maybe you use Fortinet firewalls, you have to go to the Fortinet admin GUI and then enable logging for the specified events, right? So this is step number 1. And then what you need to do is collect all of these logs into your SIM solution, right? You can send these logs. There are different ways to do it. You can use agentless mechanisms. You can deploy an agent on the machine that sends the logs to the SIM solution, right? So that's something you got to figure out in terms of how you want to send the logs. Now, once you do that, if you're able to do the specifying an audit policy and sending the logs, then the SIM solution comes into the picture and it can work its magic, right? Because what a SIM solution can do for you is then run reports, give you alerts, and streamline the process of responding to incidents. Let's look at what kinds of reports you can run on a daily basis in your organization, right? So here are a few examples. Oh, and even before that, here are what typically log sources are in environments, right? So a lot of people sometimes ask me questions. In fact, I just added this slide just before the webinar because a lot of the sessions we get questions like, what are the different machines I need to collect logs from? And there's no hard and fast rule, or there's no straightforward answer, but these are typically areas of interest, right? You've got your end user workstations and servers. These are reported log source. You've got your domain controllers, right? Your Active Directory logs. Those are crucial. Systems that store data, obviously extremely crucial, especially when we're talking about the GDPR. Your network logs are important from your routers, switches, your firewalls, your IDS, IPS, right? Your web server logs, and public cloud platforms. This is especially important in today's scenario where you have a lot of interactions of user and data happening outside the boundary of your network, right? In on the cloud, like in your Office 365 platforms or AWS or Azure, right? A lot of users might be dealing with personal data that is stored in your cloud platforms, and those logs, in fact Office 365 logs, for example, are really crucial. Those audit logs give important details into what's happening, right? And I think Microsoft even specifically has been doing a lot of enhancements for security and compliance, and the GDPR especially in their Office 365 environment. So those logs are going to be another crucial log source. So don't forget your cloud infrastructure, right? It often gets overlooked because We sometimes think we don't have control over it, but it's actually logging that you can enable on your cloud platforms and bring these logs into your SIEM solution as well. Right. So once you've done that, once you've identified the log sources, enabled auditing, and send the logs to your SIEM solution, you can then run these crucial reports on a daily basis. I'm just sorry about that. I'm just experiencing a bit of a system issue. Just stay on, just hang in there for like a minute. I'm just trying to get this sorted out. Check. Right, I think we should be back on air right now. We just had a bit of an audio issue again. I'm really sorry that we've been experiencing a couple of difficulties over the last 10 minutes, but I think it should be fine right now. Right, so I think we're back on air. So I was just saying that we have reports to actually find out exactly what's happening on a daily basis in terms of files accessed, files modified, files deleted, files renamed, and things like that, right? And we want to do that on all our file servers and databases as well, right? So we've got on databases, you want to track things like who's accessing your database, who's changing the permissions on your database, who's changing roles, who's changing values, DML, DDL, and all of those things. So those things must be reviewed on a daily basis. In fact, what you can do using a SIEM solution is actually schedule these daily reports so that you get these details emailed to you, right? So you can actually get some of these details, these reports emailed to you on a daily basis, so that the first thing that you do when you come to work is actually review these reports and ensure that everything is fine in terms of your logons, in terms of your file accesses and modifications, in terms of your database alterations as well, and database activity, right? So this is something that you can run on a daily basis. Next up, you've got to get alerts, right? In addition to reviewing activity and ensuring everything is all right, you want to set up alerts for specific kinds of misuse events, right? So if you look at things like, say, account lockouts, or if you look at multiple failed access attempts, if you look at, say, security group membership changes in Active Directory, malicious URLs, servers being shut down, network configuration changes. These are all examples of events that you need real-time notifications for, right? This cannot wait for your daily report. You can review most of your things on a daily basis and ensure that everything is fine, and that's great. But for certain kinds of events, you need to go and enable security alerting. So let me show you an example. I'm going to jump into the alerting module of Event Log Analyzer, and I'm going to show you how you can actually set up alerts for specific events that concern you, for specific events that you need immediate notification for. And obviously, this is going to be crucial to quickly detect a data breach, right? So if it's a critical event, you might not have enough time to wait for your next morning's daily report in order to detect something, because if something is really bad, you need an immediate notification. So let me give you an example. I'm just going to show you an example of how I can set up an alert to detect, say, a shutdown of a particular server, right? So a very simple example just to illustrate my point of setting up alerts. So you can just choose an alert name, of course. That's pretty straightforward. So let's call it a Windows server shutdown. High severity alert. Choose the devices for which you want the alert for, right? So using the tool, you can actually configure a Windows group or a Unix group or essentially a group of devices and apply settings to all of them. So I want this particular alert for all my Windows servers that I've configured. And then you simply have to go and choose the alert profile, which is essentially what event you want the alert for, right? So I can just, using a tool, a SIEM solution, you get the advantage of several predefined reports, which makes and alerts that make your life a lot easier. So what you can essentially do is choose the event that you want the alert for directly, as opposed to relying on some kind of scripting or parsing technique on your own, right? So I'm just going to scroll down to the second page because these are alphabetically arranged. I'm just going to go and choose Windows shutdown, right? Which is to say that in case any of these machines get shut down, I need a real-time notification. So I'm just scrolling down to see a whole bunch of different events that you can get alerts for. While I'm doing this, you can see that you get a whole bunch of events, and these are just for Windows, right? These are just for Windows. You can get alerts for a whole bunch of events pre-built using a tool like Log360. So I'm just going to choose Windows shutdowns. Sorry about that. Just trying to scroll down and hold on to a couple of things. Just a moment. So I just choose Windows shutdowns. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, I'm sorry about that. I'm just having a bit of a system problem. But you get what I'm saying, right? You can choose one of these events and then the rule gets automatically populated, right? And you can also check this out right now by accessing demo.eventloganalyzer.com. And you can actually go and get a look and feel of the tool, an online version of the tool, right? So you can see what it means to actually define and set up alerts. So if I choose a particular event and I save that event, I essentially can get that particular alert triggered for all the devices that I wish, right? And you can choose a mode of notification. You can either run a program or you can get an email or you can get an SMS when this alert gets triggered, right? So set up these alerts. Once you have defined, schedule the reports that you want delivered to your mailbox every morning, then go ahead to your SIEM solution and define basic alerts and get these indicators of compromise in place in your environment, right? So in case something like a server gets shut down or you have ransomware and things like that, set up alerting to be able to detect those events, right? So I've just little squeezed for time to actually show you in detail, and my system is also not behaving very well. So what I encourage you to do is identify more such examples. I gave you a few, but you have specific requirements in your environment. So go ahead and set up these alerts over there as well, right? And you can also leverage something known as event correlation in a SIEM solution. You can actually go beyond just individual event alerts and get alerts for sequences of events, right? This is something that a SIEM solution can automatically do for you. In fact, I can give you an example. We've got, say, I've got a lot of data populated in the online setup, and I can show you an alert that the product has triggered for a suspicious service being installed, right? So if I look at the event timeline, you can see that there's a whole bunch of events that have happened, and your SIEM solution is able to detect a pattern of events as opposed to just one single event. So you can see that there's some kind of brute force activity. A Windows account fails to log on. This happens a few times, and then the Windows account successfully logs on, and then a service gets installed, and then the service is started. Now, something like this happens on your server, on one of your critical servers. You obviously need to investigate this because this could be a breach attempt. Because how often do you guys actually install new services on your Windows servers, right? Because that's a rarity. So you can get alerts for things like these as well, not just for individual events like account lockouts or for security group membership changes, but also for more advanced attack patterns using a SIEM solution. Now, you get these alerts, and after you get these alerts, you need to respond to them, right? You have reports to review activity, you have alerts to detect compromise in real time, and then you have to go ahead and respond to the event, right? You have to go ahead and and mitigate the breach, right? So what you can still do with a SIEM solution is actually integrate your tool with a help desk tool so that every alert that gets triggered gets raised as a ticket to the designated administrator, right? So every alert that gets triggered by your SIEM solution will get raised as an alert to the designated administrator to reduce the response time. So for example, you can actually configure some of these rules using event log analyzer. You can actually add a rule to say that every alert on a particular device or a particular device group must go to a particular administrator, right? So say to the admin account called admin in the event log analyzer, that is, you can actually do this. So you can say that every administrator, every alert gets automatically assigned as a ticket to the administrator in real time based on the device group or based on the alert profile itself. So maybe you have an administrator who's in charge of all sorts of specific attacks like SQL injection, denial of service. So you can say that if the alert triggered is a brute force attack or a SQL injection attack or a malicious URL request, that needs to be assigned to someone, say John, right? So you can do this. This is a good tip because you can reduce the time it takes for an administrator to respond to the incident, right? So this is crucial. We got one more question, and it's again from Taj, who says, so the idea is to have a preventive log and auditing technical measure. And absolutely, this is you've almost perfectly nailed this, because that is what we've talked about in the last 5 to 10 minutes, right? We've looked at having a measure in place where we're able to review things on a daily basis and ensure that everything is okay. So everything that's happened till now is fine. And in case something goes wrong, you are in a position to detect, right? So this is where you're reactive. You've got a bunch of preventive measures in place, so and apart from your SIEM solution as well, and you're also in a position to get alerts because of correlation, so that in case something goes wrong at a given moment, you can immediately detect it and respond to it. And to respond quicker, we are integrating our SIEM solution with a help desk tool so that every alert that gets triggered gets raised as a ticket to an administrator, so that you have an accountable process. So as part of your personal data breach report, tying back to what we looked at earlier in the webinar, as part of the data breach report, you can document all of these things. You can say that these alerts were triggered in your environment, these administrators looked into it, and show an accountable process for the resolution of the incident, show the remedial measures that you took in order to mitigate the attack. And you can do all of these things with a SIEM solution, right? You can furnish all of these details to your auditors so that they can then verify your compliance with article number 33. And that, in a sense, is the whole point of today's session, right? We're in a position to actually create this accountable system where we are reviewing activity on a daily basis, we're triggering alerts for potential compromise, and we're quickly responding to personal data breaches via integrations. And all of these things essentially mean that you are accountable and you are taking responsibility for the security of personal data that you've collected. And that is the whole point of Article 33. It's not really an evil thing that is forcing you to report things or fine you, but rather it wants you to implement a concrete security program in your environment to ensure security of personal data. Right, so this brings me to the end of my presentation. I've sort of skipped 2 or 3 slides and directly had to jump into the product because of the issues that we faced with my laptop. My sincere apologies for that. I truly regret what happened for those 5 to 10 minutes. Right, it was just unforeseen, as you may understand. Thank you so much, though, for staying on. I was so happy to see that most of you guys just hung in there and waited for this for us to get up and running again. Thank you so much for a lot of your comments and patience during those 5 to 10 minutes as well, right? And if you have any questions, do reach out to us right now on the live chat. We'll just extend the session to another 5 to 10 minutes, and we're going to be available to answer your questions. So in case you have any questions about the webinar, do reach out to us on the live chat. But apart from that, thank you so much for joining us today for today's session and for staying and sticking around even during the technical issues. So I hope this session was useful apart from the glitch that we had in the middle. Do write to us, do interact with us on the live chat, and do let us know what kinds of webinars you'd like to see in the future as well. Right. So once again, from Bruce and myself, Siddharth, thank you so much for joining us and have a great day ahead.